I said, I have no man, no kids, no land. I'm leaving this job. I'm going to start my next one. And I launched this company, and I decided that I was going to teach people about quick, actionable things that they could do throughout the day to manage their stress.
Welcome to the podcast, The Whole and Complete Woman, where we provide practical tips and strategies for achieving your health, wealth, and relationship goals and desires. Yes, I said desires because God does not put desires in our heart just to tease us. So it's important to me that you are empowered with the tools and resources to not only fulfill your goals, but to create a life you love and create a legacy. Because the people who come after us, they are depending on us to pave the way. So I congratulate you for being here. Not only will today's content help your future self, but also those that come behind us. And that looks different for everyone, which I love. So today we have a guest here with us, Amanda Mohammed, and she is an international a mindfulness-based stress management and psychological safety consultant. She's located in Dallas, Texas, and she is currently pursuing her PhD in business psychology. She holds a master's in organizational leadership and a bachelor's degree in management and leadership. Amanda is a certified mindfulness trainer, compassion fatigue trainer, and yoga instructor. Amanda teaches individuals how to build resilience and reduce stress, as well as how to introduce different practices to the people they serve as a foundation for social emotional learning, restorative practices, and building resilience. She facilitates a variety of workshops, hosts mindfulness trainings, and serves as a coach to schools and organizations, both across the country and internationally. In addition to in-person training, she runs a web-based education platform, Mako Mindfulness, created to guide you through her framework of evidence-based practices that change the way we process and respond to stressful situations. So I am so excited to have you here. It is going to be a great day today talking about all things mindfulness and all the things that come in here with you. So this is an area that, Amanda, you are an expert in, and we are so excited to have you here, and our listeners are excited to hear from you as well. So tell us, I've actually asked you about you or told a whole lot about you to everyone, but can you go ahead and tell us, how did you first become interested in mindfulness and its practice?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here with you all today. I'm super excited to share my journey. So my mindfulness journey, I always talk about how it actually started in college, but oddly enough, if I really think about it, it started when I was just a little kid. So our family business is actually a karate school. And so growing up, I actually meditated quite a lot because before we would start karate class, we always sat down and did a brief meditation. So that was actually my first exposure to it. But the deeper story of how I got involved in it on this level, when I was in college, my family was going through an incredibly stressful season. I'll spare you the details. But I just remember that I was in this season where I was extremely stressed, I was extremely anxious, and I wasn't registering it as that, right? So I wasn't sleeping. And the way that I was getting any sleep that I was getting was not through natural causes, right? Like I was like taking a shot to get to sleep, right? Like to just relax my body enough where I could get a little bit of rest. And so it just was not a pretty season. And I remember when I was at the University of Kansas, my brother was at Emporia State University and he was studying education and he had to take a gym class. And he goes to my mom and he's like, Mom, I know what you need to do to manage your stress. You need to breathe and you need to stretch. And she's like, whatever, David, right? So my mom ends up taking this yoga class and she loves it. And she ends up like enrolling in a class at our local community college, Johnson County Community College. And she actually invites me up from KU to take a yoga class with her. So I'm like, yeah, whatever, Mom. Okay. So I go to this class and I'm in the final resting pose, which is called Shavasana. And it's the state between being awake and being asleep. And I remember coming out of the class and I turned to my mom and I go, Mom, somebody was snoring so loud. And she turns to me, she goes, Mandy, that was you. And I was like, wait, what? Like, what? What did I just do that all I did was a little bit of breathing, a little bit of centering, and listen to whatever that little teacher was telling me to do. And now you're telling me that I was knocked out past the point of even knowing that that was me. Like, that was a deep level of rest that I hadn't experienced, right? And so my mom ended up getting me this little purple yoga mat from, like, I don't know, TJ Maxx or Ross or something like that. And I started rolling it out down in the University of Kansas. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I just started playing around with different like movements and my breath and started just learning a little bit more about yoga. Around the same time, I also received a book. I found that my mom got a book from the church and it was called The Secret by Rhonda Burns. And so I remember kind of like flipping through that book. So that was one of my like earlier exposures to positive psychology, law of attraction, things like that. And then I had also found this powerful practice of breath work. Well, while I was at the University of Kansas, as you may have heard in my bio, I was a business kid. Like, I thought I was going to climb the ladder and do human resources management, director, something like that. Like, I was going to be high up because I loved to see people be in positions where they loved what they did. I always said I wanted to help people maximize their potential. And so I went on to study management and leadership with a concentration in HR. I even went on to get my master's in organizational leadership. And I went into the corporate space and I saw that like what I was seeing around me, I was like, I don't know if I want to spend the rest of my life in a cubicle like this. And so many people around me, honestly, they seemed miserable. And I didn't want that for myself. And so that was just the space that I was in. And I was being kind of pushed to accept that as normal, but it just didn't feel inherently right. And then I knew that I had these tools in my back pocket. I was doing breathing exercises. I was learning about positive psychology and just like reading all of these different books and learning about the power of my mind and the power of choice. And so, I ended up working at this job for a while, but in the background, I did my own like practices. And then I went to a small private company and I saw the same thing with the employees. And I was like, I don't know. This doesn't seem like a life that I want to live. And so I ended up honestly quitting that job the same day I was going to get fired. And I went on into education. And it was so much different because, working with students, it's such a blessing to be able to, lead kids. But also the environment was totally different, right? Like it's way different walking into a school with beautiful artwork on the walls and kids that are excited to see you than walking into a corporate space with a dimly lit cubicle. However, a lot of the professionals were still extremely stressed. And so those early practices of mindfulness and planting those seeds, I continued to study that practice over these years as I held my professional career. I was actually also just learning more about this mindfulness practice in yoga. And eventually I became a certified yoga instructor and mindfulness trainer. And I even started sharing those practices with my students and with the teachers that I was working with. And I saw that they were making a difference. And so I decided it'll be 7 years in a few weeks that I said, I have no man, no kids, no land. I'm leaving this job. I'm going to start my next one. And I launched this company and I decided that I was going to teach people about quick, actionable things that they could do throughout the day to manage their stress. That wasn't how it originally started, or, I didn't realize how concise that was going to be, but I knew that I wanted to teach people the power of these practices.
Wow. Wow. It's so interesting because we're in outside of the podcast, me and Amanda are friends. And I'm just always so blown away by you every time we talk. I feel like I'm just always learning more and more about you and all that you do. So I just love being in your presence and just, taking all
The
this
feeling
in.
is mutual.
Yeah. Oh. So you touched on it a bit. Can you explain more about what mindfulness means to you and then also how it can benefit women's overall health and wellness?
Sure. So Mindfulness practices can look a lot of different ways. And I like to express that because oftentimes when people think about mindfulness, they think, oh, it means I just have to slow down and sit and breathe in a corner under a tree. And that is not how I approach that. And that's not the only way to approach it. And there's a lot of different definitions of what mindfulness is, right? But I think the universal thing that we can all agree on is that it is a practice or something that we do to bring ourselves into the present moment. And as far as, busy professionals and ambitious, high achieving women, I am one of them. We are moving so fast, just go, 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 go. And it gives us this opportunity to pause, to check in, to actually build relationship with ourselves and understand, do I even love what I'm doing? Remember that moment where I recognized in corporate or in these different spaces multiple times where I'm like, hold on, like, do I even actually want this for myself? Is this even my own authentic achievement that I'm seeking? Am I even happy? What do I need right now? We oftentimes can't hear those cues because we're moving so fast. And so mindfulness offers us a moment to just check in with ourselves. And as we do those things over time, not only does it allow us to check in on ourselves, but it starts to happen as a default thing that we do where we can lead with our own authenticity and power versus defaulting to what everybody else wants for us, right? So the more that we have these check-ins, the more that we take time to pause, the more that we know what it feels like to feel good in our bodies, the more that we seek and crave those things and can advocate for the things that give that to us.
Yeah, I can see so many times, even with myself and my clients, that we are going, 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 going. And one of the things that I teach is that we are human beings, not human doings. We get really caught up in like, I've got to do this and I've got my tasks that I've got to get through today and this week and this month. And yes, there are things that we need to do, but we also need to be in that present moment. So I love the way that you describe that of just being very present, like right here, right now, here we are. What are some things that women can do to check in besides, and I love how you were like, no, you don't have to go sit on a tree, or sit not on a tree, but sit underneath a tree and breathe. What are some of the things that women, especially busy women, the women that are listening to this, often have very busy lives, very high achieving women, entrepreneurs, healthcare professionals, corporate women, moms, and we need those practical tips. What are some of those things?
Sure. So I will absolutely share some of those things, but I actually want to back up and say why I look at it this way. So when I first started teaching these practices, actually a fun fact, an extended version of my story is that originally I was going to do private yoga. I was going to quit my job and do just private yoga full time. And so my friend had asked, he's like, well, what are you going to do if you break your arm? And I'm like, I don't know. Right. So that was one thing. But the second thing was, I had someone originally ask me to develop and deliver a stress management training. And when I started just like seeking out what are just common best practices, like what does research say to do? It's like get 8 hours of sleep, drink all of this water, which I do agree with that. Take a yoga class. And then I started to look at the audience that I was speaking to and the schedules of the people that I was talking to. That is oftentimes just a slap in the face, right? Like a lot of times people don't have the resource. Yoga classes are a privilege. It is elitist and it can be expensive for folks, right? So to tell somebody and also look at the times that's available. When you're getting off work at 5, you got to get the kids home and they have extracurriculars and you're telling me to take a yoga class, to actually go and physically take one. That might not work for me. That's not a feasible option. Some folks are caretakers or they have kids and they are interrupted throughout their night. They might not be able to get a solid, consistent 8 hours of sleep. I don't even have kids and I don't get that consistently, right? And so I realized from that moment and also doing a training and recognizing it didn't even feel good to tell people to do that for their own well-being because it wasn't actually practical. I decided I'm going to focus on things that people can actually do throughout their day that's actually going to make a difference, right? So it's not about taking a 60-minute yoga class. If I have 1 minute before I go into a really intense meeting, or before I have a call that's making me really nervous, or when I just got out of, facilitating a project and I need to, take a moment to unwind, and I just have a moment What can I do in that moment? And so I started focusing on what are the evidence-based practices that have been proven to change the way that we process and respond to stress-related situations. Now I'll answer your question.
Oh, I love it.
What I decided to focus on was breathing and movement, gratitude, affirmations slash positive speaking slash declarations, journaling, and perspective building. And the thing about all of those is they are all free resources that you have as long as your brain is on, right? So they were all things that we could do, and there was variety within it. That's just a jumping off point of things that have been proven to change the way that our brain responds to these situations or sees these situations over time. So I do advocate for the breathing exercises and stretching. That's actually what I advocate for the most. But I also often use that as the base and then shifting into something else. So before I'll journal, I may do a quick breathing exercise. Before I do gratitude, I actually may ground myself and then move into that space. And it makes a big difference for me. But it's also something that you can do when your coworkers have GPS their way to your last nerve. You can run to the bathroom, plug your nose, and take some deep breaths, right? Like, this is something you're in the middle of a meeting and like your boss is trying you. You can literally take your hands and do sun breaths. Breathe in, clench up your fists, breathe out, release them, and bring all of that tension and energy into your hands and give yourself an opportunity to release it, to slow down, to check in, and to tend to yourself so that you're not in a reactive state and you can actually respond in a mindful way. So those are the 5 practices from a mindfulness standpoint that I focus on, but they're all just a jumping off point. I'm really big on perspective. I'm really big on what I fill my mind with. You know this, the conversations that we have, they are different. We've never talked about the Kardashians a day in my life. No shade to the Kardashians, but the conversations that we have, we're always uplifting each other. And I make sure that all of my conversations are like that. I make sure that the things that I'm watching and the things that there is a little mess that I get into from time to time that I watch. But for the most part, I try to make sure that the way that I want my mind to see and process things is reflected in what I feed it. Right? Gratitude, just making sure that I'm taking time throughout my days, this journal that I have right in front of me, constantly jotting down in it any notes, those little things that we can do that just bring you back to the present moment. They can all make a really big difference.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite things that you do to bring you back to the present moment?
So I'd say my favorite thing is going to be breathing and movement and prayer, which I kind of mix with gratitude. Those are probably going to be the things that I lean on the most. But the other thing that I teach in my practices is it's not about what you do when you get to the stressful moment. That is helpful, but it's all about the way that you prepare leading up to the stressful moment. So instead of taking a reactive approach to stress management, we want to take a proactive approach to stress management. So instead of it just being, what do I do when it happens, is how do I weave these practices into my day so that when I really need it, because when you're under a lot of stress, the part of your brain that's responsible for thinking and learning and listening and language, like, it's not like, oh, breathe. It's like, get me out of here, right? And so it's all about, planting those things throughout your day so that when you really need it, your brain actually sees those things as a resource. That's where you're going to see the biggest difference. So I do a lot of, like, my morning routine can be a little bit intense. I like to take walks. I like to do my breathing. I do a meditation in the morning. Sometimes it's usually about 25 minutes. I do a meditation. I'll do yoga practices. I do a lot of gratitude and prayer, like I said, devotionals, and really just coding my mind so that throughout the day, as things pop up, I have that to kind of land back on. And those practices, they're like a muscle, right? So the more that I practice them, the stronger that they become, and the more that I can rely on them, right? So there are things I do throughout the day, but there are also things that I try to make a part of my life and just to consistently scatter it through so that my brain's not like, now what is this you bringing up? I'm in the middle of trying to put out this fire and you wanted me to what? Breathe? Like, that's why it feels like a joke when you're super stressed and somebody's like, oh, breathe. And you're like, are you kidding me right now? Well, if you haven't been practicing it consistently, like, your brain isn't going to see that as something that's going to make a difference. It's like, you want me to put something else on my plate, right? So proactive.
I love that, just being proactive, because then, like you said, it's not this new thing that's coming up as I've got another thing that I've got to try to do right now when I'm literally in like a fight or flight going on. And that really, from my perspective, in functional medicine and working with women that have hormonal imbalances, when we are stuck in that fight or flight, when we're either wanting, and that's really designed if there was a bear coming after us, we're really in some type of danger that we're either going to fight or we're going to run away. But when we're stuck in that space, we can't get into that rest and digest and all of that. But that ends up affecting our hormones because instead of our body getting all the things that it needs to send to our sex hormones, like progesterone and all of those things, we're pumping out cortisol all the time, and that's going to affect your energy levels. It's going to affect your weight. It's going to affect all types of things when it comes to your hormonal balance. So it's really surprising sometimes because we implement this in our program with the stress reducing techniques and all of those things. But even as you're talking, I'm like, I need to bring Amanda in.
Yeah.
I'm like, I need her. Yeah. So we do a lot of the things with the women and see really dramatic changes in their lives and their relationships, all types of things with bringing in these types of practices. Tell me about a time or a client or an organization that you've worked with and some of the things that you have seen changes with them or leadership within an organization by implementing some of these practices.
Yeah, definitely. So the way that I facilitate my trainings and resources and whatnot, it really is to be able to have people walk away with actionable things that they can do throughout their own days. And I think back to a client that I worked with, and they had a Black woman leader. She's amazing. This is a global team. She is, servicing folks from all over the world, different time zones, different cultural backgrounds and whatnot. And I had the pleasure, immense pleasure of leading her group several times over the years. So I worked with them for years, going back and teaching them these practices, their perspective, different things that they could do throughout the day. And what I appreciate most is they actually took those things. So it's one thing to teach it and folks get excited about it. And it's like they know they work, but it's really the implementation of it. And so for them to bring it into their own team culture and to make sure that they are using those practices, continuing to have conversations around it, continuing to do trainings with me as well, where I'm introducing them to new tools and reminding them of those. I'm always extremely pleased to get that feedback from that team of how much of a difference that it made when they started implementing these things for themselves consistently. One thing that she always says is that it made them not only better teammates, but they also often talked about how much it made them better fathers, better husbands, better, just better team members, just better, right? And I love that because it doesn't really require much outside of intention and consistency, right? So there's a lot of things that we do consistently on auto. And so when you bring a practice like this in and people can they recognize how easy it is and they start to see an immediate impact, that just really, it fills me up. So to continue to get feedback and hear from these folks, over time about how they're still using the practices and things like that, I really appreciate that. And I also think about, I teach on psychological safety as well. And I know I worked with a nonprofit group once. And for this group, we actually ran some survey data. And something that came out in the qualitative responses, I won't expose that just in case anybody's listening to this, but what it did was it gave them an opportunity to pinpoint and hone in on something that they just weren't aware of. And the reason why is because they had a little bit of turnover within the organization, which left a lot of work falling on a couple of the employees. And so these employees are now doubling their role, but also they really want to serve, they really want to help. And honestly, CEO is just trying to keep up and keep everything together. The organization is growing, they're booming, but the resources weren't the same. So all of it's falling on just a couple of people. But literally the act of slowing down, being able to be in a space where you could communicate that and where you could advocate for your needs made a huge difference. And I loved that, literally showing them that just a training and holding that space for them and getting them to see and see actual evidence of what was going on behind the scenes of their organization caused them to create a change that not only will help you to maintain your employees longer, because you put resources in place for them, but now you had a conversation. Even that, I know I shared there's a lot of different definitions for what it means to experience mindfulness. Slowing down, paying attention, having intentional conversations, being considerate of the people that you're working with, like that too is mindfulness. And so it's not just just the little practices that we do, but it's those efforts that we make as well in the workplace that create the environment for people to be more mindful and show up and be more psychologically safe.
I love that. I hear again, like getting caught in that doing, going,
Doing
and not even realizing, the relationships that are around us and stopping and being with what's actually happening and going on, or what the people around us are dealing with, whether it's at work or whether it's in, our relationships day to day. So I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. So one of the things that I love to talk about and I teach in my programs is self-love, self-compassion, and self-care, and that they are actually three different things. And for me, self-love is really like loving ourselves in a way of like setting boundaries, asking for our needs to be met, and being aware of those things. Stepping into the things like knowing our worth, all along those lines. And then self compassion is more the feeling of like, maybe I am feeling sad or I have some grief that I'm dealing with, and being compassionate with that part of me versus like trying to shove it to the side, and really stopping and being with that. Or if I'm triggered and there's like the 8-year-old version of me, and she's kind of coming out, or the 18-year-old and she's triggered, being compassionate towards her and like, okay, I see that you're feeling anxious, or I see that you feel discouraged or alone, being compassionate towards myself. And then self-care is like all the things that we always, everything kind of gets lumped into that usually. But, going for the massages or the long walks or doing mindfulness activities. So what I'd like to hear your perspective on these things. And so, what role does self love play in overall well being, and how can mindfulness practice really support and cultivate self love?
Okay. So when you talk about self-love and, your boundaries and things like that, I think, first of all, talking about what role does mindfulness play? Remember, we talked about mindfulness being a tool that allows us to slow down and to be present. How do you even know what it looks like to love yourself when you're so busy doing that you don't even know who you are, what you actually need, right? And so I think I love your breakdown of the definitions, and I think they have a lovely way of playing together and playing off of each other too, right? And so allowing yourself to slow down, to get to the place and to really understand what it is that you need that will tend to you in those moments, right? Even when it comes to your boundaries and, knowing that, okay, like I want to say yes, but I need to say no because I need, if I'm going to be able to, show up in the way that I actually want to show up, I need to take care of me right now. I need to take care of this right now. Or I have a big rule on not saying yes if I know that when I say yes, I'm going to show up with an attitude. So, like to me, that's not just love for me. That's self love, and that's how much I love you. Because if I know I'm going to be, moody, I try as much as I can to, say no to those situations or environments and tend to what it is that I need, so that I'm not ruining everybody's time, and then it just is going to double down because then I was the butthole that was at the at the event that brought everybody down. And so knowing when you have to say no and tend to yourself. But again, when we're go 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 go, like you can't even hear that voice, right? So I think that being mindful, slowing down, and allowing yourself to hear the quiet voice, to hear the little kid, to hear what it is that you need, and then to actually tend to that, right? Because there's also, we can slow down and we can hear it, and then we're like, yeah, but, right? And so that further step, that self-love is what I'm understanding is like when you're actually, and you do something about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me, how do you determine if something is a full yes for you versus like, oh, I really want to say no. Tell me some of the processes that you go through, or your thought process, or just tell me about that.
Okay, so you know about this as my friend. But I had to learn this because I again, high achieving woman, go, 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 like that is in my nature. And I recognized, I'd say at this point, a few years back, that I didn't know how to listen to my own intuition. I didn't know what I wanted or what I needed. And so doing some healing and work around that and getting more in touch and present with my body helped me a lot with being able to make those decisions. And I noticed, I can remember like early on when I would have these like full body yes moments and I felt it and I responded to it, I'd like celebrate it because it had been so long since I had been in touch with who I am and like what my needs were, right? And so slowing down, mindfulness, if you will, but like actually doing those deep breaths and connecting and like, almost kind of like testing some different things. Like, how do I feel about this? And noticing what happens in my body. How do I feel about that? And noticing what happens in my body can actually, it helped to train me to know what that felt like. There are things where I don't even have to think twice. It's like full body yes. And then there are things where I'm like, not really feeling it. And it's like, it's not necessarily full body no, but I'm like, I know that right now this does not serve my best interest. And then there are some things that's like full body no, and I'm like, nah. And then it's all of the delicate ways to find ways to articulate your hard no. But yeah, slowing down, getting in touch with my intuition, testing my intuition, noticing the things that really excite me and what that looks like and what my response is like versus when something doesn't really excite me and what my response is like and how I show up. But again, those subtle shifts, because they're so quiet. But when you're in tune, when you slow down and when you can hear them, like they make a big difference and they can help guide you, right?
It sounds like it's two parts where one, it's like listening to like what's going on with my body, like how am I feeling? Does this feel like a full yes? Do I feel excited about this? Does this bring me
Mm-hmm.
joy to actually want to
Mm-hmm.
do this? Or is there part of me that's like, and then being with that, and then I know for me, I've had to work through now I've got to tell someone no,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
then like the parts of me that come up with that, like disappointing someone, or like maybe there may be things of abandonment, of like, well, they're going to get upset with me and then they're going to leave, or, all of dealing with all of that and having that self compassion. Like that's not the almost, well, 40-year-old version of me, that may be a younger version that, yeah, she may be a little scared right now to say no. So it's really like building that muscle of being able to like really do what is well, really when we fill our cup and we do what's best for us, it really is best for everyone else, because like you said, you showing up to something or me showing up to something that we really don't want to do,
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
really
Especially if you don't
doesn't.
know how to hide it. Like,
Yeah,
here
that's
we go
never
again. Yeah.
that's never good.
Yeah.
um So how do you encourage women to really prioritize themselves and overcome feelings of guilt or selfishness that might be associated with them practicing self-love or self-care for themselves?
Yeah, I work with a lot of teachers, mental health professionals, caregivers, helping professionals across all types of fields. And it is a real thing. So I do want to acknowledge, like, for the person that's sitting here, and this sounds like so far fetched, like I was once there too. And a lot of people are in that same boat where it feels like, but this is what I was called to do. And I think that's where it gets a little tricky when you feel like it's a calling or when you feel like it is your duty to take care of others. But my whole thing has always been I would rather love you from a place of overflow rather than a place of depletion. So when I love people from a place of depletion, am I even loving them fully? And then also, when I understand that I can only love people as deeply as I love myself, if you're looking at it from a spiritual lens, and I don't even have the own capacity or care enough to care for my own self and love myself enough, then again, I'm only loving you from this fraction of a space of love, right? And so recognizing that actually it is probably more selfish to show up and do that for you and be resentful myself than it is for me to take care of myself and love you in the opposite direction, right? And I've seen some friends and women who I feel like really demonstrate this very well. They take care of themselves, and because of it, they're able to show up and be, better mothers, better friends, better workers, because they do feel full. It doesn't mean that it always happens or that they always feel that way, but for the most part, they prioritize the things that make them them, and then they show up in those spaces. And you can feel that. You can feel, that's why we have things like compassion fatigue, because you can feel and sense when someone is just showing up and you're just another number, and it's just like, check, okay, done with you, next, check. Like, that's the space that people get into. And so if you want to avoid going that deeply into it, because compassion fatigue is just, it's a real thing, and everyone has, it's like a sliding scale. It just kind of depends on the things that you put in is going to determine where you sit on that scale. And if you're always prioritizing other people, it's going to push your meter out to experiencing more of that compassion fatigue, right? And so if we want to bring it back, it's about the things that we are consistently putting in place, right? So I do advocate for women, especially, knowing what it is that you need and doing those things. And it doesn't even mean that it's always going to look the same way. And I think another thing that I talk about sometimes in my trainings is the grief that can come with that, right? Like, in different seasons of life, things have to look different. Right now, with me trying to finish up my PhD program, my life has to look different than it did even just a couple of weeks ago. And this has done a doozy on me, right? And so, but honoring that, and then still trying to find ways to get into things that matter, even if it's not, can't look the same way, or it's not the same amount of time. I used to dance 3 to 4 times a week. Now I'm lucky if I can do it one time, but when I do it, I am there, I'm excited, and I have a good time with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that because we enter in these new units of time, where things look very different than they did, like you said, even 3 weeks ago. And I know for myself, having a 1 year old, and then my older children are 11 and 12, it's been a while since I've been in this space. But it looks different when I was pregnant, and it looks different from even before that when it comes to my business, my relationships, all of those types of things. One thing that I thought about while you were talking, um, in the Bible, it says that, when Jesus talks about the commandments, everything hangs on the two. Love God with all of your heart, soul, and mind, and then love others as you love yourself. And it's like we almost skip over that, where it's like, no, like, in order for me to truly love you, one, I have to have a relationship with God and have this vertical relationship taken care of and understand and receive the love of God. But then also I have to love myself, like, that has to be there in order first, and me putting those things in place so that I can love you from that overflow. So I just love that you brought that into the conversation. Let's see. Can you share any personal experiences or stories where practicing self compassion had a transformative impact on your life, or even the lives of any of your clients?
Yeah, definitely. I shared with you prior to us jumping on this call that just recently I had, the last, like, week or two, that I had just been in a different space. And um, it was really easy to jump on myself and beat myself up about all of the things that I should have done and all of this. But, that was in the past, and there was nothing that I could really do about that. And I can remember when I had slowed down and I sat with, okay, this is where I'm at, and did the things, even though I wasn't feeling my best, I still showed up for myself in the way that I knew made the biggest difference. So that was taking those walks and doing my workouts and getting in my devotional and praying and having vulnerable conversations with people that I'm close to. That really helped me. And again, I know those things that I needed to do, even though I wasn't really feeling like doing them, but I knew what would work for me. And I was sharing, I was so excited this morning. I woke up and I had made that decision. I'm like, it's going to be a different week this week. And surely enough, it was. And so, but I was honest with myself about where I was when I recognized it. And I think when you talk about the self love versus self compassion, like, having that moment of grace with myself where I recognized and gave myself grace and understood, like, I'm in this space because of this. And I was honest with myself about how it felt. It sucked. I didn't, um, but I allowed myself to be human, and then I allowed myself to do and be the things that I knew would help me get out of that, right? I have countless experiences or things that I could talk about on here, but I think especially if we're talking about a lot of our high achieving women. I know what it feels like to drop the ball. I know what it feels like to completely fail on a presentation or a deliverable. And in those moments, I used to really beat myself up about it. And I'm not saying it's just like a pass for just do whatever you want, but I can remember I really used to beat myself up about it. And I recently had an experience that it was a failure. Like it was tough. It was really hard on me. And I recognized my turnaround time for bouncing back was a much shorter window than it had been in the past. The way that I extended myself grace, I let myself cry. I let myself mope for a little bit. It sucked. And I also saw how so many of my loved ones, they just wanted me to get away from the discomfort of my failure. And I understand because they loved me, right? So it's, oh no, it's not that bad. And, this, I was there. It was bad. And, but I didn't need that. I needed to know it's not always perfect, and that's okay. And so the fact that I pushed and advocated for me to have that moment where it's okay that it wasn't the best, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to put things in place and make sure that I, carry out measures so that this doesn't happen again. But it also, like, it sucks, period. I don't need you to make it go away. I don't need you to make it, I just need to acknowledge, yeah, it sucks. And so letting myself sit in that and be okay with it is also loving that part. Cause I do internal family systems therapy, and there's all these different parts that are trying to work and, that want to be seen and heard and experienced. And yeah, there's a part of me that's like, it's going to mess up from time to time and the things are going to happen and it needs love too. And as long as I just dismiss it and everything has to be perfect, it's going to keep popping up trying to get my attention. And so I was really proud of myself to see myself allow sitting with it. It sucked. And I found that my bounce back time was a lot quicker because I did that. Yeah.
Yeah, I find that myself too. Recently, we went on a vacation with our family, my husband, the kids, and then we also brought along both sides of our parents as well. And that was always like a dream of mine and my husband's, to be able to do that. And now we've been able to do it on more than one occasion, which is really nice. But when I was on my vacation, I realized that this sadness kept kind of popping up. And I realized I was like, oh, I keep trying to brush that aside and be like, do all my things to get me into a higher vibrational state. And I was just like reminded, to like be with it for that moment, and it's so interesting that when we allow ourselves to be with those uncomfortable emotions, that then they are able, when we fully feel them, then they dissipate, versus why do like sometimes I'm just like, why am I feeling sad? Versus it's not like
Get
something to
out.
panic about, it's an emotion. It's something that God has given us. We have a full, piano scale of emotions, and it's okay to feel all of those. And what I realized was my father is at a place where he doesn't remember things as well. He's in his 80s. And I realized that part of me is kind of um, grieving him a bit, and knowing, the road that he might be going down, and he's the sweetest man ever and so happy. But I realized that I wasn't letting myself be with that sadness, but actually it's probably a gift, because I know that when my grandparents passed, one of them passed suddenly. And I remember my mother she didn't, for her, it was like, when her dad passed, it happened over time. So she was able to kind of grieve the process as it was happening. So when he passed, she was prepared for it. But with my grandmother, it just happened, one day suddenly, and she wasn't able to. And I changed my perspective on that, because then I was like, this is actually like a little sadness that I feel, that I'm grieving a part of not my husband, my father, that's, not really there anymore. But it's also a gift, that I'm able to kind of feel some of that now. So I know that's a little off topic, but it made me think of that when you were saying that, just being with those, all the things that come up.
Yeah, I don't think it's off topic at all. I mean, we're women, we're human, and that's part of the experience, right? And I think that those uncomfortable feelings, whether it's grief or failure or sadness, disappointment, loneliness, the lower vibrational feelings that we try to dismiss in the name of high vibrations, they're really important. Like God gave us those for a reason. The reason why you feel sad is because you have somebody that you love so deeply, right? And so I think that that has to be brought into the conversation because that's who you are. And if you're not allowing that, or if you're dismissing that, that shows up in your life in other ways too. It can show up in the way that you are interacting with your kids or your husband, even at work and whatnot, right? So I do think that there's something really powerful to just reminding women, no matter what the situation is, to be honest with yourself about what you need to get through that season. And I love that you allowed yourself to embrace that. And it probably helps you to be more present or more intentional about your interactions that you have with your dad, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
oftentimes, as women, we'll begin shaming ourselves for having those like low vibrational
Oh,
feelings, you
yeah.
know? So then, like you said, it can show up with your kids or with your partner and other places because we're almost like irritated with ourselves that, why am I feeling
Hmm.
this way? You know, or I
Hmm.
should be over this, or, you know,
Hmm.
whatever it is, versus like, yeah, it's all just part of being human.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're thinking about it from an energy standpoint, you have to remember what we resist persists, right? So if we're always dismissing those feelings of sadness and of pain and discomfort and things like that, like it's going to keep popping up in a number of ways until it feels loved and seen, right?
Yeah. And that's sometimes the only thing that like the little girl inside needs, you know, like she just
Mhm.
needs to, cause I know one of my relationship coaches, you guys know I got coaches all over,
Coaches on deck.
has really taught me over the last, cause I started working with her when I was, separated from my former spouse. So yeah, over 7 years ago, really building that muscle of being with that part of me that, you know, that she's upset, you know, and just like really having that self-compassion. You brought up energy. I want to talk about that briefly. Tell me a little bit about closing those plugs, those energy leaks in life, and what that looks like on a day-to-day basis, whether it's in relationships or with work and in life.
Yeah. So I like to think of it as just all of the things that we have on our plate at any given moment. And I know I'll actually walk you through the process that has really helped me lately. I have things I have to do for work. I have things in my personal life, things I've promised my family and friends that I would take care of them, or just like little random things that pop up, like call Southwest because they cut up on your flight the other day. Anyways, all of these little things that we have, right? And what I find is that I literally, if I don't have them like written down or in a place or designated to a day or something, have some kind of something in place to do with them, I'm just carrying it around in my head all the time. And I'm like, and you need to do this, and you need to do this, and you need to do this, and you need to do this. And it is exhausting, right? Like the constant chatter, the constant reminder, and then you feel like you're just never going to like get above water. It's just, and as soon as you do, it's like something else is being poured in. And so what I started doing was taking time to actually write down all of my tasks. So I know we do our little accountability check-in on Fridays, but what I try to do is each week I sit down and I use a big notebook. I'll try not to show y'all all my business, but I use a big notebook like this. And this works for me. I jot down everything that needs to be done. And then I take time and I look at my calendar. I look at what I have coming up. Maybe I have a training that day. Maybe I have a couple calls that day. Maybe I have dance class that day. And I look at what do my resources realistically look like for that week. And then I start tying them. I do this by Sunday. So either Friday by the time we text to check in with each other, or on that Sunday, I say, okay, this is what my week looks like. Let's do this on Sunday. Let's do this on Monday. These are on Tuesday. These are Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and even Saturday. And now everything kind of has a space to it. Sometimes I don't get to everything, and they're usually things that can be rolled over, but I can actually look at what I have. I can prioritize it, and I can tie it to a day so that it's not just constantly lingering. I know that I have a plan on when I'm going to get to it, and I will fool with it when I get there. And that alone has freed up just a lot of mental energy that I've needed. Another exercise that I do is actually like if I were to look at all those tasks. So let's say that I'm in a season where I'm a little bit busier with work and I need to delegate some more things. So I look at what are my resources, right? And I'm like, okay, I can, give this to my VA. I can give this to my copywriter. I can give this to, or I need to hire somebody to do this one for me, right? Or this is something that only I can do. And so I just take a realistic look at what I have the capacity for. And then there's things that I'm not going to be able to get to, right? Like there's weeks where I'm not going to be able to go to my dance class. I can't play tennis this day, or I'm going to have to cancel this meeting, or whatever it is. But just being mindful about my resources, my capacity, and honest about what I can actually get done. And then I find I have a lot more time in the day too, because if I just have a list of everything that needs to get done, I'm going to try to get it all done. But when I have things designated to a day, then that I can actually put a seal on that day. And I feel like at the end of the day, I can rest. I can say job well done because things have a place. I'll get to that tomorrow. Sometimes I even move it. I'm like, okay, this is not going to get done today. Move that to Wednesday. Right. So that has really helped me with just the way that I was leaking energy and just having so much just walking around my head. It is literally exhausting. And if we're looking at this from a place of whether it's manifestation or just creation, good feminine energy or whatever it is, that stuff was bogging me down. So I can't focus or rest or relax or be creative when I'm constantly got all this and do this and do this and do this. Like it's not conducive to a place of rest.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
rest is needed.
I love my rest, girl.
Yes. I'm always saying rest is like relearning our dependence on God, And sometimes
I
it
like
is
that.
like, write it down. Like, these are the things I need to get done. And then, God, I need you to step in and handle some of these things.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Powered by God for sure. Like I'd be like, Lord, I can't do this on my own. I need you to step in and do it for me. Now we always end up going to church and talking about our faith, but I tell you, like, I always pray before my day. But especially like before I get onto like an important call or something like that, I'm like, Lord, I need you to speak through me. I cannot do this on my own. When they hear me, let them hear you. When they see me, let them see you. When they talk to me, let them talk to you. Like it is always far greater when I invite God in than when I'm out here trying to do something myself. So that is another thing that I will say for any of you spiritual, God believing folk out there. Invite God in, because when you are just out here believing that it is all on you, you really play yourself. Like God will make a way to figure out some things, to get stuff off your plate, it amazes me the difference in my life that happened when I started asking God for guidance and inviting him in to do the work instead of feeling like I got to do it. And.
Yeah. At the beginning of the podcast, I always say God does not give us the desires of our hearts to tease us, and it's like he placed those desires there. So it's like there really is a plan for this, and sometimes it is being mindful, and getting into that place where we can receive that guidance and that direction for our lives, and like what really is the next step of what I need to be doing today or in this moment or in this conversation that can really drive and move things forward a lot faster than even with us trying to like push through and do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you asked me, what were my favorite practices? And I told you that I'd start with the breathing and stretching, and then I used that to guide me into that. That's exactly what you're talking about right there, right? So oftentimes before I start praying, I actually take a moment to really calm myself down. And that's when I do feel like, even if you're looking at meditation, you are slowing down enough to hear God, because that is your intuition. That is what's leading you and what's guiding you. But when we have the outside world that's so loud and, we're trying to keep up with that, like you can't hear that inner nudge, or you're not paying enough attention to it. And it is so wise, and it is God that is within you. So that's what truly what mindfulness is your oneness with your creator.
Yeah. Connecting
Yeah.
to the Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. That's one of the things I try to teach my children. It's like how can I equip them now that they can navigate life. Like, of course, we focus on academics and sports and, all of those things, but it's really like, I have to equip them to have the tools to move through life, and deal with the hardships that's going to come. Like, it's not even about protecting them from everything. Of course, I'm not going to put them in danger, but like, life is going to happen. Disappointments are going to happen. Things are going to happen, and really equipping them to hear God's voice, and have direction. I had a really important several talks with my oldest, and I just keep leading her back, like, well, let's pray about this and pause, and what do you hear from God? And it's just, I love being a witness to it, because even her at a young age, when she pauses, she gets that direction, those intuitive hits, of like, okay, this is what I need to do, and it's so much more impactful than mom saying, this is what you need to do,
Right, right.
but when
They
it's
can
like
actually hear
her own
themselves.
knowing and
Hmm.
connection to God.
Shout out to you as a mom for introducing that so early and intentionally, because I do think that these days, our kids, our students, they are in the most distracted time that we've ever been in. They have access to so much information. It's coming at them so fast. And if we are struggling with it in our 30s, like, can only imagine what a kid is. And so to teach them how to slow down, to teach them how to have that connection and that relationship with God early on, I always say I can only imagine what it would have looked like had I had these practices earlier in life, because they really have made a difference. And I know I move fast, I talk fast, I do a lot of things, but I also do this. And in the moments where I need to slow down, where I know how to access my creator, and it is my superpower. So shout out to you and your baby
Oh,
girl.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being on the show today. I
Yeah.
have absolutely thoroughly enjoyed having this conversation with you. And I truly believe our listeners have as well. So if you're listening, go ahead and leave any questions in the comment section. Tell us your story about mindfulness and how it's impacted your life.
Mhm.
And just thank you so much for being here, Amanda. Do you have any closing thoughts or reflections on this discussion? What's one thing that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I want to leave you with this, and hopefully it doesn't take us too long, because sometimes I start going on this topic. But I know I shared with you recently this concept of staying in motion. And throughout my career as a full time entrepreneur, I have experienced bouts of actual burnout. And it's so interesting to be a person that's teaching about these concepts and experiencing these concepts. But it also is important to have those experiences as a teacher, because I can speak to them from a level of experience. But I had to learn, I was burning myself out, and I was hitting these points, these breaking points, because I was going so hard for so long. And that's when life forces you to pause. So it's a lot more empowering and powerful when we get to decide those pauses. And so my mantra has been to stay in motion. But what that means is not stay in motion at the rate that I was before, and I'm going so hard like it's a train, and then the train stops and everything gets ejected from it, right? But instead, it's like taking those stops along the way so that I can have that momentum, right? And so I had to learn the difference between, I think I've been calling it like intensity and consistency. When I do the things that work well for me consistently, when I put systems in place that allow me to be sustainable, it makes a big difference versus when I am just going, like just so hard, throwing in a million other things. And so I encourage you to slow down and to stay in motion, and to find what that balance looks like for you, to do the things so that when you do have to do them, you can do them with a level of excellence. You can be proud of it, and you can also be sustainable. I don't want to keep stopping, because when I stop from burnout, I got to start all the way back over. But when I pause, I can just kind of pick it up, or I can make little shifts that make this big adjustment. And so, I want to leave you with that, to stay in motion, to pay attention to yourself, slow down so that you can keep going, because I know you want to. And as always, create a great day.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so, so much. Amanda, would you like to share your contact information if anyone
Yeah.
is interested in having Amanda come in and doing any trainings with your schools or organizations? Let us know how we can contact you.
Absolutely. So you can find me on socials at Mako Mindfulness. But where you will find me the most consistently, I am on LinkedIn all day, every day, giving you tips and resources for mindfulness based stress management and psychological safety. We've got a newsletter on there called Creating Psychological Safety, and the website, Mako Mindfulness, is a resource site. So please visit that to learn actionable things that you can do to take care of yourself and to also create environments that are psychologically safe. Feel free to email me at amanda@makomindfulness.com. But you'll find me, look me up, and I'll look forward to being in touch with you and being a resource for your group.
We'll also go ahead and link all your contact information below
Yeah,
the
that was a
LinkedIn, the
lot.
website, the
Yeah,
email
give them the
address,
LinkedIn. Yeah, give
all
it
of
to
that.
them.
All of
Yeah,
that.
there's a
All of
ton of
that.
resources out there. Thank you.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And if you'd like, listeners, if you would like to hear more from our guest experts on topics like love, health, wealth, and career, we've got you covered. Okay. So if you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe. If you're listening on Apple Podcast or another streaming service, go ahead and follow us and you won't regret it. So it really helps us out. It helps get the word out about the information that we're sharing. And it's also a way that you can help another woman. So, one of my goals in starting this podcast was to really create community and connection. So, sharing this podcast, subscribing, liking, doing all the things, it really helps us. And it helps me in fulfilling on my life mission as well and helping and empowering women to be whole and complete. Thank you.